Pundits are expecting a fiery speech when US President Donald Trump addresses a joint sitting of Congress in his much-delayed State of the Union address later tonight. That's after a postponement was forced by Democrat Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi during the recent federal government shutdown there. The US President is expected to speak under a broad theme of building a safe, strong and proud America, and comment on his administration's successes that he believes include a roaring economy. But the fight over border security and funding for his much-touted wall along the southern border is also expected to loom large over proceedings.
It will be only his second State of the Union address an opportunity to lay out his legislative agenda and make the case for his priorities during a primetime television event. And what John Hudak of the Centre for Effective Public Management at the Brookings Institution calls an important occasion both constitutionally and institutionally. The White House says President Trump will focus on 5 themes: a robust economy that has seen unemployment drop to record lows, fair reciprocal trade, a $1.7 trillion infrastructure plan, border security and immigration, and a national security policy. It will also be the first time President Trump and Speaker Pelosi will be in the same room since the government reopened, and after the Democratic leader outmaneuvered him politically during the standoff over funding for a border war with Mexico. He went on to pull his face in various contortions. Former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, who fell short in her quest to become the nation's first female black governor after the midterms last November, will deliver the Democratic response as a counterpoint to an event steeped in tradition and a president who often prefers to break with convention. And while there are expectations that the president will stick to his script as it appears on the teleprompter, Mr. Trump is infamous for his unpredictability, and given the politically bruising fight he suffered at the hands of Nancy Pelosi, it would not be unreasonable to assume that he will use the opportunity of this State of the Union to regain some ascendancy, particularly as we begin conversations about the race for the White House in 2020.
And we cross now live to our correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York to get down to the nitty-gritty. So Sherwin, you've already mentioned that it is likely to be a hostile environment, Democratic-controlled House and more female lawmakers. Just generally what is expected?
I wouldn't necessarily use the word hostile, Tsepiso. There's a great deal of decorum and tradition that goes along with the State of the Union address. As we say, it's a major television event, not quite on the level of the Super Bowl, but certainly traditionally a lot of people tune in for this as the president, touts the state of the nation, the successes that we've heard so much from Donald Trump on Twitter and various other platforms. He will talk about a roaring economy. He will talk about the deregulation that has happened since his presidency took office in January of 2017. This is very much an opportunity for the president to make his legislative case. So, as we said in that preview, he will talk a lot about border security. He will have invited guests in the audience that perhaps will help him embolden his case and make the point about this much-touted wall, which Nancy Pelosi, the new Speaker of the House, has called an immoral edifice that will be a tribute to Donald Trump. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the name Nancy Pelosi. She is the new Speaker in the House, the only woman to have held that position, the third most powerful person in government, who will, Tsepiso, be perched right over the shoulder of President Donald Trump. She will literally be on screen every time he says anything. And I would certainly watch for the political theater, her facial expressions. Will she applaud when the president says things? Will she disagree with a president that is known perhaps to embellish somewhat? Hyperbole being a middle name of this president. So there's a lot of theater to look out for. And remember, the makeup of this legislative body has changed. Democrats winning a big victory in the November midterms. They are now the majority in the House of Representatives, and we understand that the women, the Democratic women in the Democratic caucus, of course a record number making it into Congress after that election, they are all going to wear white tsepiso as a tribute to the women's suffrage, the movement that created the right for women to vote in this country, and also perhaps a subtle message to a president that is perhaps being viewed in certain quarters certainly as very much a misogynist.
And as you say, Sherwin, the optics are going to come into sharp focus, and I want to look at that. I mean, President Trump was tweeting several hours ago about the wall, and there was speculation that some of the people who will be in the arena might be immigrants brought in by people who are very much anti-Trump on that issue.
Tsepiso, I think it's really important to understand where we've come from just before this State of the Union address. There was a government shutdown. There was a huge political divide. It was a political, who was going to win this political fight? Was it going to be Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump? The president eventually relenting and reopening the government without getting the money that he had shut it down for in the first place, the money that will fund this war. So expect this president to try to come back fighting here at Tsepiso. This is an opportunity where he has the power of the platform, the power of the microphone, the power of the White House behind him, and millions and millions of Americans that are watching. So expect him to make the case as to why border security, the wall in particular as it relates to border security, is so important. But as we will hear, as is tradition, there is also a Democratic response after the State of the Union, if there is a Republican president that delivers it. And we will be hearing from Stacey Abrams, the unsuccessful candidate for governor of Georgia. If she'd won that race in November, she would have become the first black female to be a governor in the history of the United States. So she will give the response to this president. So there are two speeches we're looking forward to hearing later today. And
I'm just curious in terms of expectations from the Democrats, show, and we know healthcare has been a major bugbear between the two. And we know that Donald Trump likes to trumpet up Obamacare as a failure. And the Democrats are now saying that they do support a single-payer healthcare system, but their most important goal is to see the cost of healthcare being reduced. Could there just be some sort of truce of sorts coming out of both speeches?
Well, as it relates to the healthcare question, this has been something that Republicans, since the law was enacted, the Affordable Care Act, have tried, but unsuccessfully so, to overturn. Of course, Democrats now hold the purse strings of this administration in terms of appropriation funds for whatever project, whether it's rescinding legislation or not. So repealing Obamacare, there's no path for that to happen with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. She won't even bring that. This was what she was the Speaker of the House when this legislation was enacted, and this is very much a personal cause to her. Where we could see some bipartisanship in terms of the speech is the question of reducing the high prices of medication in this country, prescription medication, for example. There is also some coalescence that we can expect around a possible $1.7 trillion infrastructure bill that both parties seem to be in agreement about. So there are avenues for this president to reach across the aisle in this speech. The question, though, Tsepiso, is how much time will he spend on trying to generate this kumbaya moment with the Democrats, as opposed to focusing on the funding for this wall, which is a central tenet, a central pillar for his re-election come 2020. Is
it going to be a litmus test of his next 2 years, Sherwin, this particular speech?
What a State of the Union speech traditionally does, Tippy, so it lays the foundation for the legislation you want to see enacted in the remaining 2 years of your term or in the remaining years of your presidency. This is where you lay out your legislative agenda. This is where you make the case for bipartisan support, whether you're reaching across the aisle or whether it's support from within your own party. But this is a president that struggles to stick to the script. The question we also have tonight is, will he stick to the teleprompter? He appeared to do that mostly in his last last State of the Nation address. And if he were to do that, one expects it to be a kind of bipartisan, reaching across the aisle, let's make America great together and work in a bipartisan way. The question is, though, given the optics and given what the damage politically that President Trump has suffered over the last couple of weeks in terms of the government shutdown, Nancy Pelosi's political victory, will he be able to stick to the script? Or will this be Donald Trump, as we've come to know him, coming out punching, given that the political flack that he's experienced over the last few weeks?
Thanks a lot, Sherwin. And of course, you will give us more updates on that later on. Let's take you back to Stephen.